So we're in the mid-season break for Season 8, and I have to make videos to fill in the time where I can't be talking about my stupid takes on who will win and my dumb reviews of recent episodes. I felt the only thing reasonable to start with was to knock out the biggest categories of episodes in one: Marvel vs DC. Marvel and DC have fought each other 23 times in the 10 years Death Battle has been around, with 23 Marvel and 19 DC characters appearing in both. 19 DC because Batman's appeared in 4, and Lex Luthor and Wonder Woman have appeared in 2. Let's go through every episode and I'll talk about my opinions on each. Except for Lex Luthor's 2 episodes, as I've already talked about them in the Lex Luthor vs Doctor Doom review, and the episodes in Season 7 because I've talked about them in the long retrospective, and while Danny vs Jake was one where my opinion changed, none of these ones really were. To sum up my feelings on them: good, amazing fight with a shit-ass everything else that drags it down, and insult to animation with a great analysis. Also, I don't want to talk about Thanos' dark side. I did that in my finale ranking. Don't like it at all. Give like a 2 out of 10. Also, this script was started before the Batman reveal, so I'm gonna move all 3 Batman episodes to that review when that comes out. Unless, by some miracle, it's actually Lois Lane in the Hellbat, in which case Batman's just gonna get his own video. So, let's get started.
With super boobies!
Even for Death Battle Season 1 standards, Rogue vs. Wonder Woman is one of the least funny, poorly made, and entirely vapid waste of time I've ever had the displeasure of sitting through. With Rogue's analysis featuring lovely implications of Boomstick continuing to rape Miss Marvel.
Not that I blame her though. I'd be holding on to Miss Marvel for as long as I could. Plus then when she's unconscious I could...
Wonder Woman's analysis featuring a healthy dosage of good old misogyny.
Hear that, Kratos? A chick beat you to it.
Lovely implication that a woman accomplishing a physically demanding task before you is a sign of your inadequacy. And the conclusion containing lovely implications of sexual assault.
Her leg was just begging to be grabbed there. Though personally, I might have grabbed elsewhere.
You know, just having Boomstick point out that a character has a hot ass or nice tits is one thing. After all, it's not like it's particularly insulting to point out that a woman is attractive, but then he also does it in ways that just sound outright sleazy. Mixed in with all these other unfortunate implications and a disheartening lack of actual analysis, yikes. In the case of Wonder Woman's, it's far from the worst, seeing as he just brings up that she has nice tits, and that's all for the sleazy sexual predator stuff, but he does it a bunch with Rogue, and it's very unfun. I don't know if she's legal in every incarnation. The animation itself is fine. Now, for the 3rd ever animation Ben Singer ever did within a span of a few weeks, while also having to research, write, voice, and edit everything on his own, it could be worse. Obviously, it's nothing special, but the best thing I can say that I like is that the invisible jet is in the background prior to the fight starting. But it's not like I'm going to rag on endlessly about the poor animation of a novice animator who had to balance all the other parts of the production, along with his own personal life at the same time. Obviously, without that context, is a beyond ugly, boring slog with no real narrative, nothing exciting, and a runtime short enough to make Beast vs. Goliath blush like Brandon Free-For-All witnessing Ryu eating a dumpling while watching 8 Crazy Nights. But regardless, the episode is just very unfun to watch. 2 out of 10, get the fuck out of my face. Also, side note, Chun-Li vs. Mai Shunri, our score's been dropped down to a 3. That's way sleazier than I initially realized.
The winner is Ryuko.
I mean Deadpool, shit!
Deadpool vs. Deathstroke is still a lot of fun even now. Is to me by far the best of the 3 Deadpool episodes, though I'm sure that doesn't sound like much when it comes to high praise, so let me elaborate. Deadpool vs. Deathstroke manages to, for me, strike the perfect balance of Deadpool's obnoxiousness and not that. Starting with the analysis, I really liked how Deadpool's went. I appreciate the very serious style once they start talking about the backstory of Deadpool, which is legitimately quite serious, but even then they worked in some pretty funny jokes. The sort of dry, sarcastic wit where they criticize a story and make fun of what's happening is stuff I like, primarily when it's not actually attacking the character and disrespecting them, just pointing out that's a bit stupid or that's dumb. And I like it way more than the bad slapstick and non-sequitur jokes, because they always do the biggest crime with their non-sequiturs and make them go on for way too long. I just think the writing is much funnier here than most episodes. And as well, the Deadpool interruptions are better here too, because they're less frequent and they actually do well to play into the flow and versus analysis without pausing or interrupting much. His first intrusion leads to explaining his fourth wall awareness, his second leads to a joke that flows well into discussing Deadpool's skills, and it just sort of continues on like that for the most part. And I do genuinely like the banter and interactions he shares with the host in this episode more than his others. Additionally, Deathstroke's analysis is really good too, because while it keeps up the jokes and humour that are my preferred Season 2 style, once again jokes criticizing or lampshading the events of our characters' stories that are genuinely funny, it doesn't have Deadpool in it much. In fact, it's far more serious in tone. Deadpool only makes 2 jokes in the entire thing. And I'm okay with that. God, I love these analysis portions. They're way more fun than I remember, and they're very enjoyable. The fight then. The fight's great. It's by far my favorite fight involving Deadpool, and a lot of this comes from how Deadpool is bouncing off a far more serious opponent, as well as the fact that Deadpool being some crazy cosmic fourth wall breaker is nowhere near as prevalent as people generally think, and this is a lot more accurate to how Deadpool's fourth wall breaking really is. The juxtaposition of the two makes their interactions a lot funnier to me. Deadpool stands out more when he's not against a fellow jokey joker, and Deathstroke gets to be a total fucking badass all fight. Neither really feels like they got the short end of the stick here. The fight starts for reasons that feel completely in character, both are honestly just in it for the bounty, and Deadpool is making a stink of the difference in bounty they have. Although admittedly the start isn't the most interesting, they shoot bullets for a long time and Deadpool is a bit annoying with his scream of bang over and over, but I'm distracted by how I just really like the way Deadpool casually says fight. Then Deathstroke pulls out his staff and makes me realize, I'm so glad this didn't happen post season 6, because the animation would not at all have been this long, and it wouldn't have shown off nearly as much of their arsenals and had as many set pieces as if it was done today, and it was only 3 minutes long. Being a season 2 episode, we get a really cool staff versus sword fight, including Deathstroke doing this strangely badass yet paradoxical front backflip over a hedge. The way the fight very clearly demonstrates Deathstroke being a more skilled fighter by having him clearly have the upper hand is great, primarily because Deadpool isn't so outmatched as to be treated like a joke. He is on the back foot, but he's still keeping up and holding his own for the most part. We get a really cool set piece next, where they're fighting on a freeway on a bridge, though I do have 2 problems. One is that the bridge is clearly heading off into the ether, and sometimes that's distracting, but I can forgive this because it's a season 2 episode with a lower budget and an overworked animator who didn't know he was allowed to sleep once in a while. But this scene of Deathstroke firing his sniper rifle over and over is genuine ear rape. But then Deadpool does something stupid to insult him and it becomes good again. Because now is a sword fight, and damn, Torian is really in his element here. There's a great moment where Deathstroke actively taunts Deadpool. Deathstroke doesn't say much all fight, but that helps balance out all the shit Deadpool says non-stop, and it's part of why I like the contrast of personalities here. Deadpool gets to never shut the fuck up, but at least the other guy also isn't not shutting the fuck up and making it a clusterfuck of words. And when Deathstroke does talk, he sounds genuinely badass. And Deadpool's lol random moment actually feels pretty warranted and kind of funny because he's being taunted with being predictable, so it makes sense for him to go random. And the fact that he just changes outfits out of nowhere, dances to a crowd of nobody, then continues the fight, it's great. Like, he fights Deathstroke with dance moves, and it's funny and it works the lol random into the flow of the fight instead of just being a moment that happens and is immediately forgotten about, because, you know, this is integral to the progression of the battle. Because the dance fight is what annoys Deathstroke enough to take out the tire of the bus. I also just love Deathstroke's. It is just a groan. And of course this leads into the short but legitimately fucking great aerial fight. Deadpool's managing to fight Deathstroke in melee combat with nothing but a pair of handguns on top of a falling bus is just awesome. And once again, I have to praise they were able to show Deathstroke's superior skill without making Deadpool look like a total chump. And Deadpool gets to treat this fight with a sense of general jokey nature without Deathstroke coming off as a chump, because Deathstroke is a genuine badass all fight, so even if Deadpool's treating it a bit more comedically, he doesn't want to get hit by Deathstroke, and Deathstroke still manages. And then Deadpool stabs him with his own sword and gets hit with a flaming semi-truck falling on his face. There's another thing we wouldn't get if this was a modern death battle. This is a moment to breathe. After all that fighting and the two getting smashed, we get this nice moment that not only really well demonstrates the difference in their healing factors, but also just generally lets us have a small break to let what happened settle in. Deadpool's healing factor is much better to the point where he takes a much harder hit than Deathstroke, but he gets back up way sooner. But due to his healing factor's capabilities, he's too careless and he gets his limbs mixed up and has to fix that. The mix-up that shows off Deadpool's personality and abilities gives Deathstroke enough time to pull out the sword and recover. Obviously, he takes longer to recover because his healing factor isn't as good. Unfortunately, my one honest major problem with this entire episode sort of rears its head in right at the end. Deadpool pulls out the carbonadium sword to the tune of Sword Art Online Swordland, and you'd expect us to get a fucking great final showdown where Deadpool finally gets the advantage in a sword fight, presumably because his healing factor has allowed him to stay in better shape than Deathstroke, who's now slower and weaker due to fatigue. But instead, it's one clash and then Deadpool shoots Deathstroke in his one working eye. Alright, well that still could work if the rest is good, but instead Deathstroke swings his sword around in anger, which just looks really fucking janky, and Deadpool swings his sword behind Deathstroke, who falls to the ground, his head clearly not detached from his body. In fact, Deathstroke's head and Deathstroke's entire body looks fine aside from his eye, which now has a cut over it instead of a bullet wound, and then next shot, Deathstroke's head is suddenly cut off and Deadpool throws it behind him where it vanishes into the ether along with the rest of the bridge. Aside from Deadpool telling kids to cover their eyes before shooting Deathstroke's eye, and the bit where Deadpool uses Deathstroke's decapitated head as a hand puppet, which is some fucked up shit but really funny, I don't really like this death. And it's a shame because I really like the conclusion as well. Like, it's funny and I like it. The episode is just as good, if not better than I remember. The fight is so fun, the analysis is so entertaining, everything is so good. But there's that one thing that stops it from being a 10 out of 10 for me. I can forgive the weird looking arena, the one ear rape scene, and the bridge in the ether for just being season 2 things. Those are just things that are a result of a low budget that you can't avoid. And the ear rape scene, it's just one very brief moment. But the legitimately disappointing ending sort of leaves me unsatisfied. And that is what bumps it down from a 10 to a 9.5. Yeah, 9.5. It's just on the cusp of greatness, the very edge of being an episode, but the flaws are so minor, or the positives so absurdly high that I don't care. It's so close, and I hate that that ending just takes it down that tiny peg. I say on the cusp of greatness, but I think a great episode is like an 8 out of 10, so, I mean, even a 7 out of 10 is a very good episode. Still, this is one of Season 2's best, and a fucking fantastic episode.
I'm gonna record it and make it my ringtone.
I think the most memorable parts of this episode's analysis are them referencing Nervous Nick and calling Hawkeye's height his weight right above his actual weight. Well, that and the hype as fuck usage of the MCU Avengers and Justice League Unlimited themes. Plus, those ending clips are cool, especially Hawkeye's. But while the analysis is simple and bog standard, the animation is actually much better than I remember, and honestly deserves probably more credit than it gets. For a fight between ostensibly two normal people with a bow and arrow, this fight's really well done. It starts at a long range which allows them to focus on archery, then gets up closer where there's a bit of a melee battle and ends with a clash of arrows. It's short, sweet, and what you need from this matchup. What really makes the fight fun for me though is the use of trick arrows. We have these bouncing ones, which is just a funny little visual gag, but also the trading of Hawkeye used the arrow with 1,000,000 arrows, so Green Arrow uses the tornado to scatter them, and in the chaos Hawkeye used his zipline arrow and he gets shot down, so we use this weird grey glue arrow to blind Oliver, who uses corrosive acid from a trick arrow that he's not even shooting to melt it off. Just fucking asinine, but hilarious. And in that moment, Clint's able to use a grappling hook arrow to get back up and not die from the fall. It's a great little sequence of trick arrows being traded back and forth. There's a fun little moment with the boomerang and boxing glove arrows and Clint's Megaton Warhead arrow. That's not a Megaton explosion, but let's be generous and say it's a regular bomb arrow. And the one melee interaction they have, while short, is also pretty nice. They trade blows, and I like Oliver using his arrows in a melee setting. My only real issue with the fight is that the ending is lame. I don't mind the idea of the arrow clash, and I'm glad they didn't try to somehow trick you into thinking Oliver's diamond arrow was actually going to get through the adamantium. And the shot of Clint's arrow breaking through Oliver's is actually really cool. But the final shot's really unclear on what happened, and we don't see any visible wound on Oliver's body after. Also, Canary being there presenting to Clint is just fucked up, man. Like, not even in a funny way. So yeah, it's pretty good. I don't have a lot to say about it. 7 out of 10. I think it's very underrated, but still not that interesting.
Finally, a worthy opponent.
Let's race to Japan.
The analysis of Flash vs. Quicksilver also has the MCU Avengers theme, which is based. Actually, while Flash's analysis is good and all and really captures some of his coolest finite feats, Quicksilver's is the more interesting one somehow. There's a genuinely funny joke about Boomstick driving his dune buggy into the water, a fucking Boomstick dad joke that I honestly didn't mind because it's literally just there so Wiz can take a jab at him. And Boomstick also has a jab at Wiz too, which I liked. Then he uses the Fox X-Men theme and makes me happy again. It leads into a relatively funny joke about Boomstick's temper, and man, I like Quicksilver's analysis. It made me laugh a few times, especially a little bit where Boomstick hurts himself at the end and we get to hear Wiz laughing at his misfortune. It's way funnier when it's not shown on screen, because when it's not shown on screen, you can imagine whatever you want in your head happened. You can imagine what he ran into, how he fell, you can imagine it being funny. And everyone's going to imagine something different, so it's going to be specifically funny for them. The fight then. Captain America hits a guy with a car, gets out with a title card, and does nothing for the entire fight. The animation legitimately starts with a big-lipped alligator moment. Aside from that, I kinda like the setup. You know, they show up to save someone, and Quicksilver's massive ego gets him to challenge Race to a Flash, and the entire fight is the two just having a race that goes by so quickly that it's over, and Flash still has time to save. Though it's weird, are these birds also moving at super speed? Is this Windy Tornado light speed wind? Nah, Flash probably just went back in time and saved her before she crashed. Something about the way Quicksilver just out of the blue and completely randomly says, "Let's race to Japan," is really funny to me. Like, I like the setup, but I can't help but imagining Quicksilver as this massive dickhead who just finds speedsters and says, "You, let's race to Japan." It's fucking stupid. And him being a massive dickhead gets him to fight while racing. There are some really nice conveyances of speed that feel faster than even Wally vs. Archie. I don't know how to explain it, but Wally vs. Archie doesn't really make the characters seem too fast outside of the start, because these moments of speed are slower on screen, and has them stop to fight each other more often. Flash vs. Quicksilver, however, has a lot of moments which is just pure speed, where you get to see them run from one end of the screen to the other in a frame. And due to us being able to see objects we can recognize the scale of in comparison to how far they're moving, it means more. I can't tell how large these white lines are just based on how they look here because I have no context, but I can tell that skyscraper in the distance is very far away because I've seen skyscrapers from that far away in person. Quicksilver running from beyond our line of sight to past the point of view in one frame is far more impressive looking than anything Wally or Archie did. Unfortunately, Wally vs. Archie did everything else better. The fight itself is far from interesting. There's one moment where Quicksilver makes a tornado and Flash undoes it, and that's a more interesting trading of abilities than Wally vs. Archie. But Wally vs. Archie had things happening. Flash vs. Quicksilver has pretty much nothing going on for most of it. They have great conveyances of speed and some nice running, but they didn't really work in the fighting. I really like the shot of them streaking across the ground from a bird's eye view and transitioning to seeing them running over the desert, but then instead of combining that with the fighting, it just, now there's fighting, spinning time. I'll admit, it is really funny to me though that they use the fucking tornado arm spinning attack to send Quicksilver through a flock of birds, and then Barry's just so fast he lands on the birds and jumps off before they even react. But then there's the really strange Barry taunts Quicksilver, then after 2 entire punches says this is dumb moment. What the fuck? Why? And you know, it's about this moment you realize that the actual fighting part of this fight animation consisted of Quicksilver punching Barry 2 times without him paying attention, the 2 trading blows in the air 1 time, a bit of stuff on the tornado, and then them trading 2 hits near the end. That is the extent of the physical altercation that happens in this fight until the very end. And the end is great. Once Barry takes the fight to the Speed Force, we get this fucking awesome speech from Barry, accompanied by a beautifully animated burst of speed that once again is just more impressive than anything in the other Flash episode. And holy shit, the ending with the Flash theme from the TV show blaring while Barry goes absolutely fucking ham on Quicksilver, the way Barry progressively gets faster and faster with each hit on Quicksilver is just flawless, building up to a really, really lame killing blow. Oh, not the lightning though. I think it would have admittedly been cooler to see Barry running around super fast to build up the charge along with more lightning effects and a really explosive feeling of energy, but I still think it looks cool with how it hits Quicksilver so hard he shatters out of the fucking Speed Force to reality. But then Quicksilver just lands on the sword of a statue and dies. Just the way the music stops, his scream peters out before he even hits the sword, and a very simple stabbing sound as he hits the statue, it's just, God, it's lame. You had such a good thing going there, and it just ends. Oh, lame. Fuck though, I love this one line from Wiz at the end.
As fast as Quicksilver is, the Flash is just much, much faster.
They didn't even bother to hide how big a stomp this was. Even with their lowballing, they fully go into Quicksilver is completely fucked. Flash was so much faster that they just say he could predict and counter every single move Quicksilver would ever make. Love how blunt the conclusion is. Flash vs. Quicksilver, did I like it? Yeah, probably give it like a 6.5. It is a good episode, but it's completely carried by the Speed Force scene, and if that wasn't in the episode, it'd be a flat 6, straight up. 6.5, that's where I put it, 0.5 from the Speed Force scene.
He regularly fights foes with light speed capabilities, while that
Kind of speed is an extreme rarity in the Marvel Universe.
Hulk vs. Doomsday is good. I like this analysis quite a lot. I love the joke about Boomstick asking how far Bruce got sent flying by his abusive father's backhand as a baby, and Wiz callously and tactlessly giving him an actual estimate. I even like the Boomstick dad joke, and it is mostly carried by Wiz's reaction. And I like the way they show the Gamma Bomb, that's in the corner. I also like the 2 talking about Doomsday's origins with the that doesn't make sense a lot and Bertron was an asshole. It just cracks me up the way they talk about Doomsday's origins every time. Analysis is great, and they don't do much versus wise, but I like how they play as a collection of the most ridiculously over the top feats that make no goddamn sense. It's amazing. And the fight is, so good. Sure, aesthetically it doesn't look the best. It looks very outdated, but this is Season 3. I can't be too harsh on the looks of the fight, and I can't be too harsh on the silhouette people for Season 3. Though, I will admit that Hulk's model is legitimately hideous, and this guy was supposed to have his head crushed, but fucking, that is a footnote. This fight is genuinely amazing. The sound design, animation, and speed of this fight makes it so every single hit feels like a freight train. Compared to some of the moments of Hulk vs. Broly,
disappointed.
Okay, so far the sound design is pretty similar to the starting blows. Alright. Hulk vs. Doomsday is still better in terms of sound design, but it's fairly similar. But then, yeah. Hulk vs. Broly certainly looks more destructive, but Hulk vs. Doomsday feels more destructive. I'm sure I explained it before, but just showing me a planet blowing up doesn't do much if there's not much sound design. Watch. See, that doesn't instantly feel impactful just because it looks really big. This, on the other hand, doesn't look very big, but the rubble and sound design makes it work. When Hulk is smashing Doomsday with the car boxing gloves, a great reference to the 2008 Incredible Hulk film, all the shit flying everywhere, the dust, rubble, bits of car breaking off with each hit, makes it feel so destructive. And I love how they interact with the environment. Doomsday throws a goddamn bus at Hulk, and then he drop kicks through the bus into Hulk. That is fucking hench. Not only that, but he punches Hulk through the top of a skyscraper. Hulk then tries to thunderclap Doomsday, and it actually fucked Doomsday up quite a bit. But then you get the feeling that Doomsday's slowly adapting to it. He walks through and he brings the whole building down with a single punch. That thunderclap has so much more energy to it than most attacks in Death Battle, like, goddamn. And you know, I really think it's the rubble that helps this animation. This must have been hell to render. But goddamn, the fact that the smallest hits in this fight cause shit to fly everywhere, the ground to be torn up, the buildings to shatter and break, even Doomsday walking in causes rubble to fly into the air. There's so much destruction happening all the time with every hit, and the motion... this fight feels so brutal. Like, once again, compared to Hulk vs. Broly, the environment almost never reacts to their attacks. When Broly blows a bunch of shit up, there's just explosions, but the ground is unchanged, undamaged, flat. Fuck, when Broly throws Hulk into the ground, there's no rubble. There's a big hole, but there's nothing flying upwards into the air from the impact, like there should be from throwing someone that hard into the ground. And when Hulk hits him with a big rock, there's nothing after this shot. We don't get a wide shot to feel the impact of this rock. Seriously, why is it that every single hit in Hulk vs. Broly when they're on the planet does no damage to the planet's surface? It actually bothers me. And there's not really any moment to let the planet destruction sink in. This world blows up with almost no sound at all and no emphasis because it goes immediately to Hulk hitting Broly. This one is better, but the sound design still sucks, and the third one isn't good either. And the galaxy shot looks really awesome, but doesn't look destructive because there's no remnants of the galaxy, there's no actual explosion. Like, if someone erases a universe, it doesn't look super destructive just because, universe is big. It just looks weird. And people can be like, the galaxy destroyed, planets blow up. So what do you mean it doesn't look destructive? It's like, just because a big thing went boom doesn't feel destructive because there's no emphasis on it, the sound design is bad, and there's nothing tangible, there's no sense of scale for me. Hulk vs. Doomsday has all the rubble, all the destruction, things are smashing every second of the fight, something's flying around from the force of their attacks. Now, I still think Hulk vs. Broly is a good episode. I don't even think it's in the same league as Hulk vs. Doomsday. And the death here is just another thing to it. The absolutely brutal nature of Doomsday impaling Hulk repeatedly, along with beautiful sound design for impalement and the flashing of neon with each stab making it feel so much more painful. Leading up to this fucking brutal, no-holds-barred beatdown where every hit sounds like it's turning Hulk's face to mush, crushing his bones and splattering his head open. It feels like every single hit Doomsday is throwing should kill Hulk, but Hulk's healing factor is keeping him alive just so he can survive to feel the next brutally painful punch in the face. His blood is violently splattering everywhere so much it gets in the camera itself, leading to Doomsday making sure the last thing Hulk ever sees and the last thing Hulk ever hears is the face and name of his killer. knowing full well that he has failed to protect the city. He has not saved the day, and Doomsday wrenches his head off his body. He doesn't cut it off, no, he just pulls it off with brute force. That is a fucking nasty kill. One of the best death battles ever done. What can I say? I adore this fight. This is the fight I go back to when I think, how do I make something feel more impactful? Small scaled as it is, the sheer destruction within a scale is incredible. After all, you don't see people saying that, oh, Saitama doesn't feel strong because his feats aren't cosmic. You're really going to tell me that this feels less impactful than this? Just because, oh, that's a bigger thing, Keeping things local gives context. It's hard to comprehend the scale of a planet exploding because we could never witness it. We can never see it with our own eyes. You can comprehend the destruction of a building collapsing, and that sense of scale is worked beautifully in this fight. Now, I do think you can do celestial destruction well. I think all Hulk vs. Broly needed to do was put more time and emphasis into the planets exploding and have a better sound for the planets detonating. I don't even think the galaxy scene doesn't need to be reworked. That doesn't need to feel like this big, impactful, destructive thing, because the unimpactful nature of it is what makes it so terrifying. These characters are not trying, and they're wiping out all lights in the galaxy. You don't need to make that feel destructive, but the planets should be. Also, Hulk vs. Doomsday uses fucking Metal Gear Revengeance and Guilty Gear music? That's awesome! Hot wind blowing and sky should be higher, fucking hype as fuck tracks. They have so much energy, they enhances every scene, especially the death. I love Ikari, I really do. But this sort of heaviness is what characters like this need. Ikari is not even remotely heavy, but this is heavy as I want. Not brutal death metal or grindcore or anything, but power and thrash metal work flawlessly with monsters like this. And the conclusion is very well done. It goes into a lot of depth, it even brings in some real-world science. But it also makes up headcanon about how exactly Hulk's regeneration and anger correlate when they don't have any evidence to support them in universe. But you know, you can't win them all. Yeah, I know a lot of people hate this episode because my Hulk dub, and being all upset about it being wrong and all that. But it's not my place to say whether or not an episode is or isn't wrong, and whether or not either character has been downplayed or wanked or whatnot. It's my place to review the episode in spite of the results and where they put the characters. I love the episode regardless of those factors. It's an easy 9.5 out of 10. A better Hulk model and a little bit less of that unsupported headcanon bullshit, because at least several supernova headcanon nonsense had some evidence behind it, even if it was still wrong. And it'd be better. I know that some people who are real sticklers for how the fight looks at a standstill are going to be all angry at me for ranking this here, when on purely aesthetics it hasn't aged very well. But fuck off, the animation is really good and I enjoy it. First thing I want to say is that while I'm sure people were wondering why this matchup happened, let me be frank. Venom and Bane at the time were each other's most popular matchups, and if you pay attention to the start of the fucking episode, you know why this is a thing beyond just being using a liquidy thing called Venom to get their power. The thematic nature of this fight is dark reflections of Batman and Spider-Man who were inspired by them to become what they are now. My problems have nothing to do with this matchup itself. It's everything else I have a problem with. Well, not everything. I like Boomstick ranting about the naming origins for the two, and the imagery of Venom walking through a convenience store aisle, and I like the questioning of a baby in jail. That's just amusing. Beyond those moments, the analysis is painfully boring. Not outright bad, mind you, but so boring that it pretty much just leads up to the fight to entertain me. And did it? So the start and setup is nice in concept. Tapping into Venom's more horror-esque nature and having him hunting for brains certainly does work. And I like some things. While it looks jank to fuck, I like the idea of Bane brute forcing Venom through a bunch of boxes, and the idea of Venom reversing Bane's famous backbreaker on him by impaling his knee is good, if poorly done and incoherent as fuck, with Venom vanishing from Bane's arms and a bunch of spikes stabbing him randomly out of nowhere and then vanishing in the next shot. And the death is good, no way around it. Venom filling Bane's head with his symbiote to blow it up is great. But Venom fires a bunch of webs only for Bane to just be wrapped up by a pool tube. Beyond that, the fight is boring at best and incoherent at worst. Bane shooting a gun at Venom looks awful, look at his hand. The two trading rapid fire fisticuffs has a sound effect that is timed wrong and sounds awful. I used to even use this sound effect, and now I don't, specifically because it sounds like shit. But the following fight is just impossible to follow. The camera is too close and moving too much, the characters are fuzzy and out of focus. Look how blurry some of these still frames are. What are you supposed to make out? Then this happens and feels like some stuff was cut out. Weird. I should note that all fight, Venom is acting strangely more like Carnage, talking about how delicious and spicy Bane's blood is. I'm sure all the fans of Venoms were loving. They weren't. I've seen tons of Venom fans say they were very unhappy at his portrayal. Venom goes to slam onto Bane, who dodges, and while this could be shown to us with a nice quick animation, we already know this fight doesn't do those very well. So hopefully it does slower bits better, right? Nope. Bane spends fucking ages moving close out of the way, and Venom's lands, apparently hurting himself. Doesn't even remotely look like it. We get more overly unfocused fighting from Bane. We get a lovely moment where Bane fires a rocket that then slowly approaches Venom, explodes behind Bane, and then it immediately hard cuts to this shot of what I initially thought was Venom in the rubble. But no, that's Bane. He just teleports between shots. Fucking hell. We giantly cut to this footage of water recolored to be green, which happens a few times in this fight, leading to the knee drop and then the death. What is wrong with this animation? It feels broken. And the conclusion is lame. So, that was bad? That was bad. Ugh. I give that episode a fucking 2 out of 10. There are points where my eyes literally hurt from watching it, trying to figure out what's happening. I can't fucking stand it. Is this animation just actually broken? Yes, because the Rooster Teeth version is even worse. That is right, this absolutely fucking shit show that legitimately hurt my eyes is the better version. The Rooster Teeth version is 1 minute and 25 seconds longer, and it's not like there's much more going on. In the original Rooster Teeth version, we get things like the shots of Bane's goons taking even longer to get to the fucking point, having a needlessly long version of the shot where Venom walks behind Bane, a strange shot of Bane's back, and instead of the weird and jarring YouTube version of the Your Blood is Spicy scene, we instead get a weird ass Bane karate chop walk up scene. Then Venom moves, we get this legitimately painful slow series of shots of them approaching, their fists getting closer, Bane missing his punch, Venom still moving from his dodge, and then a weird and jarring cut where suddenly Venom has dashed past and cut Bane. It's not even like the original is better because it's less jarring, it is just as jarring but takes ages to get to the fucking point. And then we get a whole new scene between Venom slicing Bane's neck and web grabbing him. If you were wondering why Bane was suddenly in the air in the YouTube version, here's the reason. Because in the original he slowly runs up to Venom who dodges, hits a wall, we get a zoom in on Bane's manly thigh, he pulls his arm out of nowhere dramatically, like we don't even see his fist get stuck or anything. What the fuck is this? He didn't throw anything at Venom because the next shot is this genuinely terrible shot of him jumping at Venom, and that is why he's in the air suddenly in the YouTube version. And guess what? The rocket scene? Yeah, that's shitter too. Bane throws Venom and move on to the next shot! Then a painfully long scene of Bane just standing there holding the rocket launcher as sounds of him prepping it to fire play. Oh yeah, also, the scene of him actually breaking the crate open to get the rocket launcher, that was added into the YouTube version. In the original, he pulls it out of his ass, and then he fires it, get on with it! Then the one shot I actually wish they kept in the YouTube version is Venom's goop moving away from the explosion and Bane landing on the truck. Like that sudden cut in the YouTube version is insanely jarring. Oh, and in the YouTube version, Bane just picks Venom up and backbreakers him, but in the original he picks Venom up, slowly moves his arm to slam into the ground, and then does the backbreaker. The rest is pretty much the same, but Jesus fucking Christ, who the hell thought this was okay? Who the fuck animated the... Caius? The one who animated Mob vs Tatsumaki, Roshi vs Jiraiya, and Ultron vs Sigma? Really? This was one hell of an off day for him. And I say off day because I refuse to believe this was animated in more than a day. I mean, the YouTube version is better and it's a 2 out of 10. This is a fucking insult. I'm so glad Caius got their groove back. Caius, I'm glad the animator got their groove back and delivered us some fucking bangers like the 3 previously mentioned fights. This is a 1.5 out of 10, and that 0.5 is because I refuse to let any other episode get a score as low as Mewtwo vs. Shadow. Because, I mean, at least this animation didn't insult either combatant, it just insulted me.
You! No man can enter Themyscira unannounced.
Well, then when she's unconscious, I could...
Thor vs. Wonder Woman is a fucking godsend after that last episode. Good thing I'm not judging this based on how much an episode is better than the last one, because otherwise this would be a fucking 10. But Thor vs. Wonder Woman is what I would call aggressively average. That's not to say it lacks anything that's particularly good, I really like Thor's rundown. The analysis overall had some real groaners in there, but what I liked was that they went all in on the sheer absurdity of these characters and acknowledged that these two are no pushovers. They're powerful. Boomstick even got to be smart and show off his knowledge about snakes and constriction, which I really appreciated. I like Boomstick being able to be more than just a joke machine, having an actual fucking role. Death Battle fan and writers, Wendy's was alright. Certainly better than the first one by a landslide. And the fight, what a mixed bag. It has some banger moments, but all of them come from Thor. My favourite moments are the raw as hell moment of Thor shattering Diana's shield like glass with one hit, or slamming Diana so hard she goes flying from Earth to the moon. Their fight involves the obliteration of said moon and earlier on a mountain, as well as a ton of massive blocks of stone and shit. The fight goes all in with the heralds causing tons of destruction, and I'm all for that. Someone like Thor hitting people so hard they go flying long distances and shattering celestial bodies is stupidly in character, I love it. And honestly, the choreography is really nice at points. The early sword versus hammer fights and the ending bit with Berserker Madness Thor is actually really well done. Until the end of it. Because the end is the funniest fucking death, aside from maybe Cloud, and honestly embodies everything wrong in this animation. It comes completely out of nowhere, involves a shot cutting from Thor to Thor, now suddenly not glowing in a completely different position, then spontaneously Wonder Woman is stabbed him through the back of the head in the funniest death phase aside from maybe Batgirl. There's a line from Wonder Woman that makes no goddamn sense given the context of this fight. Then Thor falls to the ground, obviously not properly aligned with the floor, his cape is clipping through his ass, and his model is literally T-posing at the top and not fully rendered. It's a damn shame. This fight has a ton of problems, and most of them come as a result of this animation being literally unfinished. Now there are problems aside from that, namely like the setup for the fight is literally Thor appears in Themyscira for absolutely no established reason and Wonder Woman picks a fight. The moment of Wonder Woman saying such reckless abandon seems to be too fast, as she says it, then immediately says the next thing, as then is also immediately cut off from finishing. So it's almost as if there wasn't enough animation. And the end line of, "You're not worthy," just seems strange. Why would she say this? The only reason is if she knew how Mjolnir worked, and she doesn't. If she recognized Thor, then they wouldn't have acted like they didn't know each other at the start. He's definitely not the Thor from her world. It's weird. Or was she just trying to point out that he was not a Death Battle trailer maker? But even then, that would be all forgivable if the animation could be finished. And I feel bad judging this fight because it literally is a result of just not having enough time to render. The rendering process has been admitted to by Torian as a complete nightmare, and there are several scenes he's shown off on his Twitter that didn't make it in, and you can blatantly tell the rendering issues. Scenes like the tornado blatantly show unfinished models, such as Thor being completely flat and unshaded and having none of the metal texturing on his armor. The explosions from the moon shards hitting the floor are not finished and literally just a flashing of colored circles. Thor's cape clips through his body an unbelievable amount of times. Like, even Balrog didn't clip this much. The lightning effect for Thor about to leave the mountain by getting rid of the mountain, it's literally just a single PNG of lightning flipped horizontally over and over. Several times you can tell their mouths aren't moving despite talking, most notably Wonder Woman's "time to stop holding back, Diana," which neither has a moving mouth nor an effect on the actual voice to indicate she's thinking to herself. Also Wendy being clocked by Mjolnir in the tornado. Supposed to be talking, but she's not. It feels like a scene of Wendy taking off her gauntlets or charging at Thor between the two back-to-back shots of just Thor was meant to be there, but it's not. The animation is just blatantly unfinished, and I don't like that. But it's not Torian's fault, but I can't not judge an unfinished animation for being unfinished just because there's a reason for it. It's a good reason, I'll admit that. Time constraints and hardware issues, but unfortunately all these problems do bring the fight down, and that's something I can't avoid. I wish Torian had the time and ability to go back and finish this fight and add in all the scenes that weren't there, finishing rendering. It could have been something special. But unfortunately, even with all the benefit of the doubt, the best I can give this episode is a very low 6, and it's a shame. But Thor's first episode was great, so I can live.
Oh, I get why it's called the power of nothingness now. There's nothing left in his chest.
There's very little going on with Batman Beyond vs Spider-Man 2099. In fact, my comparison between it and Beast vs Goliath is even more apt. Not only is Goliath there as a statue, but the fight amounts to some well choreographed stuff at the beginning. They fight on the side of a building, there's a bit of them falling down the side of a building, they land on the ground, and then it ends. Now it is better than Beast vs Goliath. Like, after all, the start is both well choreographed and also interesting. The sprites match better, I like the characters talking with their helpers, and it just generally is more entertaining. But the fight never really gets started. Well, okay, that's not true. The fight gets started, and it never stops being just at the point of started. I actually really like their fight on the side of the building, you know, with Flying Terry and Ball Sticking Miguel, and I like the shot of Terry's reflection. This is actually a really overall cool thing. And it leads to Miguel getting bolused and dropped onto a car, which is a fun nod to the original Batman vs Spider-Man. And honestly, if this was the start and it led to a great second half, that would make this episode fine. But once they hit the ground, well, this is not the start of the second half, this is the end. Literally all that happens is Miguel runs at Terry, gets flashbanged, and dies. Wow, so the Marvel guy runs into the other guy and gets whacked a bunch before a grievous chest death? How many times will Beast vs Goliath be brought up with this episode? Anyway, yeah, that was very disappointing. An awesome ground fight would have been really cool, and instead we get literally nothing. And while Batman gets to give Terry some minor advice in the fight, Lila is completely fucking useless and never helps Miguel at all. That's well balanced. And you know, Wiz says at the end that Batman told Terry to use a flashbang to take advantage of Miguel's senses. But when? When does he do that? That might have been cool to see. Batman observing how Miguel fights on the ground. During his hack battle with Lila, maybe Batman could get some specifications on Miguel's suit, putting 2 and 2 together with how he fights and how the suit covers his eyes, and determining a weakness that he tells Terry to utilize and capitalize on. But no, what happens in the fight is Terry uses a flashbang of his own accord. And the death is really sudden, and I didn't see what happened the first time I watched the episode because Miguel's body fell to the ground before we got any real time to see the wound. Wow, that was boring. 4 out of 10. Get it the fuck out of my face.
Dr. Fate's ultimate attack being creating the infinite gender.
So many boomstick dad jokes in one video. Can't survive. Anyway, so Strange vs. Fate's a good episode. Wow, it's been a while since I've said that, hasn't it? As an episode, I do have my fair share of problems with it, but overall, it's solid. The analysis was fun and informative, and while it didn't have me rolling on the ground or even really laughing, I did still find myself entertained. The fight's also pretty good. In fact, when they're actually throwing spells back and forth, it's really neat. And I love the idea of the helmet being taken off, but rocketing all the way from where it was lost back to Kent. That's just cool. But there is a strange focus on melee combat that really bothers me. Like, the start of the fight involves Fate going in for melee. Okay, fine, a little melee's alright. But then they continue to do physical fighting while between universes, and then Fate loses helmet and punches Strange, which I'm also okay with. Really, it just feels like more spells should have been going back and forth. I really like the start of the fight. I mean, yes, Fate's throwing hands, but there's teleporting, Flames of the 14, summoning pillars. And I like the ending where Strange uses Fate's weakness against him, and he uses the Crimson Bands as Sidorak, and Fate gets the helmet back, and Strange tries to astral project into his mind, but that ends up ultimately being his undoing. And yeah, True Fate doesn't do much at all despite all the emphasis put on the Superman level gender, but then apparently in the comic True Fate also does almost nothing, so this is just in character. And I do think it's almost fitting that True Fate literally just existing was outputting more power than Strange could handle. That is terrifying. Unfortunately, all the stuff in the middle amounts to Strange and Fate go to random places and nothing actually happens while they have a fist fight. It feels like a very missed opportunity. I wanted to see these two rewriting the rules of reality, bending and warping physics, popping supernovas and shit, really going to a cosmic scale, breaking the limits of what you can do in an animation, because that is what these two do. But that's not really what we got, and for that reason I consider this episode amongst the most with wasted potential. Because while I didn't need all of the potential, I would have liked some of it. Rewatching this almost makes me want Zatanna vs Scarlet Witch so they can rectify this massive waste of potential. But with that in mind, this episode's a solid 7. It's good, but it has a ton of missed potential. Also, Dr. Fate's mouth doesn't move when he says shut up.
What the? Was that live action? Shit!
Did they really just play Chris Tucker's You Got Knocked the Fuck Out, man? So Nightwing vs Daredevil is an episode, but the only thing it has going for it is the novelty of being live action. A novelty that is actually detrimental to the episode's quality, and even then we've got another live action episode now and it's much better. Not to compare it to other shows, but Bat and the Sun's superpowered beatdown fights are much better, and Isma Hawke's own versus series minute matchups is better. Nightwing vs Daredevil's just so fucking lame. The entire fight I like 2 moments. I like the moment that they have to pause and breathe because, you know, it's live action, you have to sell at these 2 blokes. And I like the one bit where Daredevil throws his stick behind Nightwing and it bounces off a car to clock him. That's it, that's what I liked. Analysis was boring and lame, fight at best was dull at fuck, and at worst was legitimately awful. That killing blow? That's just a right hook. I know I've talked about how bad Bucky vs Jason's death is, but Red Hood's death might as well have been Ganondorf's compared to this. This is one of the absolute worst deaths they've ever done. It's a really stupid looking show of Nightwing going to punch, he hits Daredevil and Daredevil falls over. and I guess through the power of love or something, his helmet has also fallen off of him. Okay, sure, doesn't even look like it fell off of him. It looks like Nightwing took it off and put it down over there. There are no lines I liked, no interactions of any worth, very little utilization of the environment outside of Nightwing essentially doing the equivalent of flicking a light switch, and overall, not the best showing from Ismahawk. 3 out of 10, fuck off.
You are such a terrific dumbass.
I like how they say Namor shoots lasers with his trident while showing Lego Namor shooting water. Anyway, so Aquaman vs Namor. For a battle containing one of my favorite DC characters, it's surprisingly mid. Like, it's not bad, I enjoyed the analysis more or less. I think I've come to realize after watching all the previous episodes that sometimes a lot of what can make an analysis entertaining is the music, you know, hearing familiar tracks from the character's home series, but that ain't in this no more. So, while listening to them hype up Aquaman was great, not getting to hear any tracks I know, aside from the one superhero sounding one they play all the time in literally everything, including the 7 Battle Royale, kinda brought it down. The analysis was just fine, jokes existed, blah blah blah. Fight was good, not spectacular, but it was good. Aquaman steals the show, he has all the best lines, his voice isn't annoying like Namor's, he gets to be a cocky snide smartass, and while Namor does get the fight escalated, he's such a drag all the time compared to Aquaman. Aquaman breathes big dick energy, Namor breathes incel simp energy. Really, it's hard to talk much about this one because it's just generally good but nothing awfully special. 7 out of 10, 6 of those points coming directly from Aquaman.
Robinhood is an investing app that lets you buy and sell stocks, ETFs, options, and cryptos all commission free.
You really think you can get away with something so petty?
Shazam's analysis uses the same fucking stupid superhero music Aquaman of the 7 uses. I hate this. But Boomstick makes a joke about orphans without talking about his dad, so I'll allow it. Anyway, so the analysis surprisingly has quite a few jokes I like Boomstick and his beer, and a lot of the jokes in Shazam's analysis. I actually really like Shazam's analysis, and it's definitely going to help this episode score. Shazam's analysis is a lot of fun. And yeah, I really like this episode, as unpopular as that opinion is. I think the animation is quite fun. It's admittedly nothing overly special, it's the most basic ass quintessential cape shit fight. They fly around, hits feel impactful, bunch of fun banter, of which everything came from Shazam. And outside of the stupid reason they fight, which I can forgive, because Shazam's definitely too stupid to explain because he's a child, the only real issue with this fight is that Shazam kinda bodies Captain Marvel. Like, Captain Marvel's first hit doesn't look like it did much, while Shazam's first hit, well, he threatens her, then he smacks her so hard she goes flying and can't even react before he goes and wails on her more. Captain Marvel's only moments of advantage feel like they didn't do a whole lot of damage, while Shazam slightly hits her and she's fucking dazed. And unfortunately, I'm not really feeling Shazam's Shazam shout. Doesn't work for me. However, it does lead into the hilarity that is Captain Marvel going binary, then doing worse as binary than she did as Captain Marvel. Cause it looks like Shazam decided to stop playing around and just destroy her. Like, he taunts her while matching her blow for blow, catches her next punch, and in a raw display of brute force throws her through the ceiling of the sewer, out the earth, into the asteroid belt, through several asteroids, and then ends it with a full-on punch that vapes her. And the voice actor for Shazam didn't sell the Shazam shout, but he did sell the effort he's putting into those 2 attacks. I genuinely love the shot of Captain Marvel being launched into space and Shazam pulling back for his final punch. I just wish the death was better. Like, this explosion just feels like such a letdown after all the build up to that punch. Legitimately either have the explosion extending outwards and shattering every single asteroid in the asteroid belt they're in, or have Shazam punch her so hard she becomes a black hole. Either or, episode would have been better. As it is, 7 out of 10, mostly because Shazam's analysis saves her from getting like a 6.
This is where the fine print matters. Beast did not actually lift the whole 60+ ton tree off the ground.
Oh, last fucking episode, Jesus Christ. Ghost Rider vs. Lobo was good. Analysis is solid outside of them reusing the same joke from Ben 10 vs. Green Lantern.
And eat his feelings away as Upchuck. Wiz, that's really not a healthy way to handle issues.
You know, you're right, Boomstick.
Yeah, he should really just stick to alcohol. And then he got so face-meltingly angry that he just straight up ate a city, all at once. Disclaimer, don't eat away your feelings. It's not healthy. Drink them away instead.
And while it wasn't anything overly exciting, I enjoyed the analysis enough. These two are just so absurd it's entertaining, and the fight is very solid as well. I'm not a fan of Ghost Rider's voice performance, it sounds like just a bloke, but when it turns into Zarathos, that's fucking great. And Lobo is also extremely good. He feels perfectly in character and has some very Lobo moments. The fight primarily has 3 phases. The first is the motorcycle fight, which is perfect for these two. Even Lobo noping Ghost Rider's penance there by headbutting him in the middle of his speech, that is great. The second is the lamest, which is them fighting normally, but they didn't put much time into making this interesting. At least it ends in an interesting way, with Vor and inflation. Ah, lucky day, 2 fetishes for the price of 1. Then out comes Zarathos and the Lobo army, and it does feel like Zarathos comes out really early. Like, there should have been more Ryder and Lobo fist fighting. It doesn't feel like Johnny got overwhelmed based on how quickly Zarathos comes out after Lobo starts gaining the upper hand with his Lobo crew. It feels either more like he activated the Super Saiyan form, which doesn't sit right, or like he just tags Zarathos and he was like, you know what, Zarathos, just do it. I really need to go home. I gotta watch the next episode of Celebrity Apprentice. Please, just let me, just finish this for me. At least Zarathos himself is awesome. His voice is more what I expect from Ghost Rider. I love how he and Lobo get so into the fight they wipe out each other's entire corporeal bodies. Like, it's not just Lobo whose body is vaporized, so is Ghost Rider's. He's got to put his body back together. They even take out the country they were fighting in. Give Lobo credit, he vaporized Zarathos. And the death happens and it's the coolest thing ever. I love Lobo trying to get out of Zarathos' chains with his fucking teeth once he can no longer grip with his hand. Yeah, for a horrible murderer like Lobo, it's weird that the screams of suffering aren't as pronounced. But god, Zarathos' line delivery and the scream, god, it's just the fucking coolest shit. Still, while I have little to actually say, I think it's a really good episode. A high 7. It's really damn good. Also, I like the joke about Boomstick trying to plug the Death Battle shirts and Wiz slapping him.
Almost as incredible as these new shirts from store.roosterteeth.com.
And that was every Marvel vs. DC Death Battle reviewed. Opinions are opinions, of course, so I don't think anybody will agree with everything I've said. But this was a fucking long one, and I need a break, so have a good one, fellas. God, I need a nap.